Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and hello everybody. My name is Amir and today I would like to talk about the MoU's effects. Now, the MoU was signed about a week or so ago and already it has faced lots of challenges before it was signed, and after it was signed there are serious chances of it falling apart. But that does not mean it is without effects. As many have seen, prices across the world have been spiking in food, in energy, in electronics, and many other products that require one or all these three. However, that is not to say that all the effects have been negative either. For instance, Pepe Escobar noted how recent conditions and the improvements in the Iran-Pakistan relationship should enable the completion of the Iran-Pakistan pipeline. This is a pipeline that was proposed years ago and was built on the Iranian side to to channel energy from Iran to channel energy, namely gas, but presumably oil, from Iran into Pakistan. The Iranian side has been built, but Pakistan was unable to complete its own section due to sanctions. Therefore, the pipeline has been in a state of dormancy for years, until perhaps now. He also stated that trade through Chabahar from China would also be improved, given that the Chinese will have been trading through Gwadar, which is only a short distance away from Chabahar, and that they also prefer to do their business in Bandar Abbas, which is further west in Iran. It could it is it is quite possible to see all three ports boom with increased Chinese trade over the coming months, especially so given how Iran's oil is in sharp demand from China as well as the rest of the ASEAN nations. But of course, Iran cannot provide all the oil that has been removed from the market. Its increase from 1.1 to 1.5 million barrels per day, whilst significant, could not hope to dent the many billions that have been removed from the global economy. He also stated that Pakistan allowed Iran to finally counteract Western AI targeting of their leaders. This is linked to Chinese and Pakistani technological breakthroughs in AI. This information was transferred after the Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, Brigadier General Ali Larijani's assassination in mid-March 2026. The definitive proof, he asserts, was how these assassinations simply disappeared right afterwards. This is a serious reason why President Masoud Pezeshkian's first visit abroad was to Pakistan. And over there, I note that he was greeted very warmly by both military and civilian leaders, and his own entourage was regarded and his own entourage regarded the visit as highly productive. Larry Johnson also explained that the brokering of the MoU and the meeting in Cairo were both brought together by Pakistan. The one in Cairo was attended by Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, and they came together to recognize the new security framework that President Vladimir Putin constantly speaks of. He emphasized that this is a fundamental change in global politics, and Pepe Escobar agrees with the assessment. and I too agree with these assessments. The days of bull- bullying the GCC by the US is over too. By waging war, the US, ironically, has sped up the creation of a new architecture that facilitates global trade. And in facilitating global trade, it would also foster closer binational and international relations, creating a nexus of local and regional powers, all the while spearheaded by the two global powers in the Eurasian continent, Russia and China. And whilst Iran might not be a global power, not, nor even a nuclear power, its power as its status as a serious regional power in Southwest Asia, along with Pakistan, along with Pakistan as the regional nuclear power, would see the creation of a new security architecture based around these two throughout Southwest Asia, as Iran protects itself and its allies, namely Hezbollah, Iraq, and, and to a limited degree Ansarullah. Meanwhile, Pakistan would protect the GCC, the entire GCC, if the UAE would, if the UAE assumes allows it to do so, which I must confirm they are. The UAE seems to have given up any hope of resurrecting its close relations with both the US and Israel and have chosen to take the off ramp. So far, there has not been any serious 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 violations in their off ramp they have sought with Iran. But there has also been something else that even I did not notice. Throughout these months, we have seen Iran constantly assert the necessity the necessity to maintain the territorial integrity of Lebanon, but not much was spoken of Palestine. That was recently explained by Professor Mohammad Marandi. He explained that the reason why Iran cannot impose a similar ceasefire between Israel and Palestine, like it did with Lebanon, is because there exists a ceasefire agreed between the US, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, and a reluctant Hamas. The US is frequently deflecting Iranian attempts at a true ceasefire by stating that ceasefire is already in place in Palestine, even though Israel regularly violates it. Iran is to contest this point in the future, and whilst that may not necessarily happen, the next 60 days nevertheless would be eventful. He also confirmed that in Iran it is believed that Israel attacked Qatar's gas infrastructure to punish it for its contributions to the MoU and to serve as a false flag attack. Hopefully, we will not see further false flag attacks, but I am skeptical on that front. Throughout the second imposed war, we have seen many false flag attacks using drones that have been claimed to be by Iran, only for Iran to come out and deny it, thus leaving the only culprit to be Israel and the US. Professor Muhammad further explains that Iran is now diversifying its trade away from the UAE and towards Pakistan and Oman, all thanks to the US. I must also note something about Pakistani history. Karachi, which used to be the main port and airport not only of Pakistan but of the entire Southwest Asia at one point, was so because at the time there was no other similar infrastructure. At the time, Saudi Arabia existed only as a monarchy that profited from its oil. At the time, before President Richard Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard and would later put it on the petrodollar, some of these GCC nations, such as Qatar and the UAE, did not formally exist as nation states. But ever since the petrodollar and the foundation of countries like the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait, there has been a concentration of trade and infrastructure around places like Doha, Kuwait City, and Abu Dhabi. Thus, Karachi lost its place as more players joined and more important resources in the advent of the petrodollar started to come into maturity and demand in the global economy. Given recent events, it is quite possible that Karachi, Gwadar, and Chabahar, along with already known hubs such as Bandar Abbas, would see trade return or even concentrate even greater than in the past, given how their competitors in the GCC nation states have serious trouble rebuilding, if they even could be rebuilt, as in the case with the wellheads of Qatar. But in the meantime, there have been developments in Syria. As Professor Muhammad explained, the so-called president of Syria, Ahmed al-Julani Hussein's willingness to speak with Hezbollah is a sign of recognition of Lebanon's autonomy, which is due to Iran's victories in the second imposed war. He knows that Hezbollah is dominating the battlefield. He never said this during the second imposed war. Instead, he tried and failed to seal the leaky Syria-Lebanon border. Intriguingly, there have been suspicious murders of key al-Qaeda and ISIS leaders in northern Syria, his old allies. It is believed that he is cooperating with the US to commit these murders to cement his crumbling rule. Syria itself remains in anarchy. Different factions rule portions of the country, poverty is rife, and security is abysmal. These factors make an attack on Lebanon unfeasible, and even if he did, the Iraqi resistance movements have warned that they would invade Syria, so he is merely being politically expedient. There have also been developments in Iraq. The recently elected Prime Minister, Ali Faleh, deployed tanks into the Green Zone, arresting multiple government officials. Some reports claim that this is an anti-corruption campaign. Others claim that this is an ejection of Iraqi anti-imperialists. 12 people were arrested. Alex Cristoforo asserts that such an action required US permission, and if so, it means the US is using the MoU to crush any resistance within the Iraqi government. And I agree with that. I also would like to point out that the new Prime Minister, Ali Faleh, is a businessman of 41 years old. This makes him prone to US influence through his mere occupation and implied connections with US corporations operating both within Iraq and abroad. He is also a member of the Iraqi Bar Association, so it is quite possible that he knows his way around the law. We will see in the coming weeks what his true plans are. But let us return to Lebanon, because there has been one very important development. Lebanon and Israel signed an agreement focusing on the disarmament of Hezbollah. This erupted into widespread protests, with a serious possibility that the Lebanese government could be overthrown. Professor Marwa Othman confirmed that over Ashura, that is June 25th, over 100,000 people gathered in Dahya to demonstrate their resolve in the face of Israeli aggression and the Lebanese government's willingness to cooperate with Israel's occupation. Additionally, 20 parties, including Hezbollah and the Amal movement, rejected the agreement. Only 4 approved. As we can see, the MoU is already starting to make waves, even in its infancy. The Southwest Asia was never truly extinguished, and there are bound to be repercussions from all of these actions. We will see in the future just how powerful, just exactly what the legacy of the MoU is. It is likely, however, that the US could prove to be the ultimate loser, along with Israel, in these exchanges. But let us return to the SMO, because there has been some updates. Alexander explains that last week President Volodymyr Zelensky warned Belarus to cease all drone flights into Ukraine and all petrol exports to Russia. A few days later, he upped the ante by ordering the cessation of all economic relations with Russia. Alexander warned that the threat ought to be taken seriously, since Belarus has only 20,000 troops in its entire army. Its equipment is outdated, and it has no combat experience. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military, despite having similar equipment, has been reinforced with many NATO pieces, and is equipped for and does have considerable combat experience. These seemingly large Russian armies, he said, present in Belarus, turned out to be quite absent. Thus, the idea of a Ukrainian invasion of Belarus is quite tempting. Such an attack will constitute a new front that has no Russian presence. Belarus previously dealt with a Western color revolution in 2020 to 2021. A Ukrainian advance could be facilitated by similar actions within Belarus, and whilst President Donald Trump may not approve, the EU and the UK will support such an operation to the hilt. Alexander Mercurius relayed a Financial Times article that justified a Ukrainian attack on Belarus as evidence of preparations for such a campaign. However, there are reports that such an assault were aborted. President Vladimir Putin and President Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus called each other. The two plan to meet at a summit soon. The Russian Security Council also met, with President Vladimir introducing the director of the FSB, General of the Army Alexander Bortnikov, and Minister of the Interior, General of the Police Vladimir Kolokoltsev. The meeting centers on internal security and relations with neighboring states. Alexander Mercurius points out that both bodies, critical to counterintelligence, may indicate that the presence of both bodies critical to counterintelligence may indicate that they plan to prevent any major subversive acts within Russia. Said actions have already resulted in the assassination of multiple Russian military officials. Neighboring states does imply Belarus and its protection. President Alexander Lukashenko explained how Ukrainian envoys came to Minsk recently. He complained to them that Ukraine's designs on Belarus will see Ukraine's fortunes drastically decline over the course of the SMO. The delegation replied that both they and President Vladimir Zelensky understand this. Now, Alexander Mercurius interprets the complaint as implying that due to this Ukraine invasion, Russia will no longer consider the SMO as such. Instead, following the Treaty on Mutual Security Guarantees, it will go to war with Ukraine. It will be in a legal state of war, in other words. In another interview, President Alexander Lukashenko explained how he does not seek to conquer territory and that he only seeks peace. This peace must come with a guarantee that the West will not interfere in Belarusian affairs and that there are no deceptions. Such deceptions will harm Belarus, which is the western tip of the motherland, the Slavic lands, in other words. And they are well aware of this. Meanwhile, Ukraine is merely a bargaining chip. After the interview, President Vladimir, and only he so far, reported that the relay stations guiding Russian drones within Belarus have been switched off, implying that Ukraine is no longer seeking to invade Belarus. However, neither Alexander Mercurius nor I believe him. And personally, I never believed him. Alexander Mercurius asserts that more Russian units will be deployed to Belarus, in addition to the Russian nuclear deterrent that was already stationed there, thus creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. However, he does warn that if Ukraine continues to pursue, then it will indeed get its front that it wanted so badly. But it will be a case of be careful what you wish for. And lastly, I want to talk about something that has not been truly talked about in its full depth and probably will not be talked until the end of the SMO, the true cost of war. Now, whilst that would require significant computation, one important metric is the war dead. And we got an update recently from Major Scott Ritter, who explained that Wagner alone absorbed some 200,000 to 300,000 dead in Bakhmut before it was completely absorbed into the Russian Ministry of Defense. Additionally, the Ministry of Defense does not count DNR and LNR dead in its statistics. But if we add them all up, it makes the current death toll on the current Russian death toll to be around 1 million. There are even some villages in the patriotic Republic of Buryatia that have no men. And there are massive graveyards in the Trans-Baikal area far to the east. That is a very significant number. And whilst these numbers are parsed in terms of their political affiliations, it should not be forgotten that a good chunk of them are Russian citizens, and nearly all of them are indeed Russian. That is 1 million souls who are not with us, 1 million people who no longer are economically viable. 1 million less who will be there to rebuild the nation. The costs of this war have not been small, not even for Russia, as we can clearly see. And there will be many more costs to count indeed. The wounded, those who have experienced psychological issues such as contusions or merely horrifying memories, or survivor's guilt. There will be other costs indeed, and the such as economic and the many relationships damaged or even cut off between Russia and the rest of Europe. The EU, of course, being the greatest loser, as almost all of this damage is self-inflicted. And with the US no longer acting in accordance with the Alaska agreements, it is more than safe to say that Russia will be looking east and build new connections, build new facilities of trade and transport in the Far East and throughout Central Asia too. Hopefully, despite these costs, much more has been gained. It will take a long time to realize this, of course, as with the MoU, but I am more than confident that things will indeed turn out for the best. After all, CENTCOM was defeated and Ukraine is being defeated. Israel is no longer being allowed to expand, either from the inside through its settler population, nor from the outside due to a much stiffer opposition in the form of Hezbollah, Ansarullah, and now a greatly bolstered Iran. We will see just where these developments go, but I am more than confident that it will be in the positive. I am also still keeping an eye on the Iranian detonation of a nuclear device. We will see exactly what the implications of it are, if it ever comes to fruition, which I do believe will happen, given the US's known given the US is known to be agreement incapable. Thank you very much for listening, and I appreciate any questions in your comments down below. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.